Stories shape how we see the world. Voice of Witness is an award-winning oral history nonprofit harnessing the transformative power of storytelling. We work with individuals and communities impacted by injustice, helping them document their lived experiences through oral history, telling their own stories in their own words. In an era of reductive sound bites, we need this kind of nuanced grassroots storytelling to create a more just future. Visit voiceofwitness.org/learn to get involved, check out our workshops, and download tools to support your own project. Join us in building a more connected world, one story at a time.
Hi, I'm Rashmi Sajani, founder of Girls Who Code. Look, I'd consider myself a pretty successful adult woman. I've written books, founded 2 successful nonprofits, and I'm raising 2 incredible kids. But here's the thing. I still wake up wondering, is this it? And if the best years are yet to come, when's that going to start? Join me on My So-Called Midlife, my new podcast with Lemonada Media, where we're building a playbook for navigating midlife, one episode at a time. Each week, I'll chat with extraordinary guests who've transformed their midlife crisis into opportunities for growth and newfound purpose. At some point, we all ask ourselves, is there more to life? I'm here to discover how to thrive in my second act, right alongside you. My So-Called Midlife is out now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Lemonada. Hi, it's Gloria Riviera. You just listened to our mini-series on the state of foster care. I'm happy to now share an episode of the Lemonada series, No One Is Coming to Save Us, in which I talked to the vice president of the Annie E. Casey Foundation's Center for Systems Innovation, Sandra Gasca, and CEO at Foster Forward, Lisa Guillette, about how they're helping youth aging out of foster care age into an ecosystem of belonging. I hope you enjoy it. Hello, and welcome to this episode of No One Is Coming to Save Us from Lemonada Media. This podcast was co-created with Neighborhood Villages, a systems change nonprofit working to realize a future in which all families have access to affordable, high-quality early education and care. So, listeners, we have spent the majority of this podcast talking about early education and childcare. But what about those kids who the system is failing later in life? Just a moment of personal reflection. I grew up with several siblings. My next immediate oldest brother was adopted, and our family adored him. He was like my brother. He has since passed, but my whole life, he was my brother, plain and simple. On my maternal side, my mother grew up with many foster siblings on a farm in eastern Washington. And actually at family reunions, sometimes doesn't really remember, maybe it's because she's in her early 80s, who's a relation and who's not, because she felt so close to her foster siblings. That's my background. We're lucky today because we have 2 experts. But I just want to say to everyone listening, we all remember how hard it was to transition between adolescence and adulthood. But most of us had at least someone, maybe more if we were lucky, right? Like a sibling or a relative to lean on. Now imagine trying to navigate that change from adolescence to adulthood without the support of a traditional family. That is the case, that is the reality for countless young people aging out of foster care. Research shows that young people in these situations need a lot of guidance, right? We all do. And that includes permanent, meaningful relationships with supportive and reliable adults. So in 2021, here's a number for you. There were more than 147,000 kids between the ages of 14 to 21 in the foster care system nationwide. That number is actually lower than what it was back in 2006, a drop fueled by COVID-19 that led to fewer reports of abuse and neglect. But even though the overall number of young people in foster care has declined, the teenagers and young adults still in the system are really deeply struggling to achieve permanence. And I want to ask our experts today what that phrase really means, achieving permanence. Thankfully, there are people out there who are prioritizing helping adolescents thrive in this post-pandemic world. We want to thank the Annie E. Casey Foundation for making this conversation possible. And now to our guests, I'm so excited to welcome you both. I wish our listeners could see Sandra's hot pink blazer and attire today. She is Sandra Gasca-Gonzalez, president of the Annie E. Casey Foundation's Center for Systems Innovation. Sandra is in charge of overseeing the national and state reform efforts related to child welfare and young people transitioning into adulthood. Also joining me is foster care innovator, I love that phrase as well, Lisa Guillette. Lisa is the CEO of Foster Forward, an organization focused on supporting young adolescents and adults who are currently or formerly in the foster care system. She has an incredible story. Both Lisa and Sandra are doing truly amazing work. They have been doing it for a very long time, helping foster a better future. Sandra, Lisa, thank you so much to you both for being here.
Thank you for having us, Gloria. We're so excited that you're talking about this very important topic.
I'm so excited that I'm talking about this very important topic. And Lisa, not only have you been in this work for a very long time, but you have a really beautiful personal story that is part of your life now. Can we start there? Can you share it with us and tell us about Bianca?
Sure. So, I came into this job before I met Bianca, and one inspiration there was my godfather was a foster parent who took in teens. So that was kind of part of my childhood experience. And it was really the only connection I had to foster care when I interviewed with the board of directors and started at what was then called Rhode Island Foster Parents Association. We rebranded in 2012 to Foster Forward. But a few years into that journey, we started a program called Real Connections to help young people who are most in danger of aging out of foster care without permanent adult connections, and to pair them with volunteers in the community, adults who are willing to connect with them for at least a year, no matter what, and really help them build their social capital and their community connections. And I was recruited by our coordinator who runs that program, Kate Bronner, and she said, listen, we have a young woman named Bianca. She's in high school. She's a junior. She goes to school right near your house. And we think that you would be the perfect mentor for her. She wants to go to college. She'll be the first person in her family to do so. And so I met her at a local restaurant over lunch, and Kate made the connection, and her school social worker was there. And that little group, her school social worker and I have now seen her through high school graduation, college graduation. She did a year of LaSallian service as a volunteer in St. Louis. We helped her when her mom passed to bury her mom. We've helped her through a number of family tragedies. We helped her move to Florida. She enrolled in law school. She's completed law school now. We were together at her graduation. And she's become a member of our family, and she's also become part of our Foster Forward family with these extended community connections. And today, she's a kinship caregiver to her 16-year-old niece, and she's also, having her sister live with her. Her brother, was with her for a little bit too. So she's really holding down an entire family, and she became a permanent part of our family. Shortly after we got connected, she became homeless when her mom ended up going back to jail. We had an extra bedroom and bathroom in our home, and we invited her to move in. It just made sense. She really just fit in with us, and she's been a part of our family ever since. And I never knew when I took this job that it would so profoundly change my life, but it's incredible to have a daughter. I married a guy who had two sons, so I'm both a stepmom and essentially an adoptive mom to Bianca.
That is so wonderful and beautiful. And having had 2 boys and then a girl, I completely understand. It's a whole new experience. And it makes me happy. I have a big smile on my face just hearing that story. It's a really wonderful story. So Sandra, now I want to ask you, both of you are deeply involved in helping these kids, right? And they all have different experiences. Be it positive, negative, whatever the experience was, when a young adult is at the stage where they are ready to leave the foster care system, what are they looking for when they get out? And can you talk a little bit about the different, you've used the word cliff before, and how it varies from state to state. Someone might assume, okay, 18, that's it, but that's not always the case. What is someone looking for when they're ready to age out, and how does that number shift state to state? And are there positives and negatives to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it depends on who you ask, how they will answer that, because that question is so personal to a young person. But the one thing that I think there's a difference in how system people see what the answer is versus what young people see what the answer is. And the one thing that we resoundingly hear from young people all over the country is that they look for family. They are always looking for family. When they get separated from where they've been, whether it's their family of origin or somewhere else, they never stop yearning for having that connection to their family. And so that's the number one thing I would say that is what young people say. And system leaders and system people will agree to that. But they'll also say, we really have to start preparing them for independent living. They need to go to school. They need to have a vocation. They need to go to college. They need to have a place to live. All their basic needs need to be met. And oftentimes in the system, the way it's structured is that there's such a focus on the basic needs so that they can thrive into adulthood that it overlooks the underlying need that young people say they want, which is family. And that's really the thing that we're trying to shift these days. But there are a lot of systems doing great work to help prevent that cliff that you're talking about. That's what I would call the basic needs cliff. It's not the family cliff. And so the basic needs cliff is, yes, young people in, I think it's about 40 states now, can choose to stay in extended foster care, which provides tuition waivers, provides help with housing, education. It's different in every state, how they're structured, but that there is something available to them so that they can start to thrive from a basic needs perspective. But I would want to emphasize that the system stops focusing on legal permanency. And I know we'll probably talk about what that word means, but legal family, once they turn 18, that's really when it stops.
Okay, let's pause right there because I am very interested in this idea of sole permanence. Do I have that phrase?
Yes, you do.
Okay. So this is interesting to me because I had not heard of this. I did not know what that meant. Can you talk to me about what sole permanence means and when it came about? And maybe, Lisa, you can start with that.
Sure. So I was fortunate to be part of a conversation that was convened by a group of young people and supported by Sandra and her team. And they were young people who are nationally recognized leaders. They're young fellows from the National Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative. And we started an exploration about the inadequacy of our current child welfare system in the types of permanency we have. You know, when we talk about legal permanence in child welfare, when children come into foster care, more often than not, their case plan goal is reunification. So reunification with their birth family is a legal permanency. If they're not able to return to their birth family, then adoption used to be the other form of legal permanence. During my tenure here, we recognized that adoption wasn't culturally appropriate for many families because it required a legal severing of ties with birth family. And there are many families that don't look at permanency that way. And so the advent of guardianship provided us another legal option for families to pursue. And then the last disposition, which is not considered permanence, but is what was happening was young people were aging out of foster care. They were basically closing to care when they reached the age of majority in their state without permanency having been achieved. And so this conversation with young people was incredibly illuminating about their lives didn't fit neatly into those boxes, and that in many cases, our pursuit of a permanent option actually left them more disconnected from the people and the communities that they had been a part of. And that in some ways, sitting back as a professional who was focused on the cliff, focused on the physical and tangible supports that young people needed, realized that we were doing a tremendous disservice to both young people and to their families by not really acknowledging the complexity of those relationships and the importance of doing everything possible to uphold and support and nurture them. Because what we were finding on the other side is kids were leaving foster care and they were completely alone. And, when we think of Ancestry.com today, or we use the term eco-mapping. Most people have about 300 living relatives, and you started the story talking about family reunions. Everyone should be able to go to a family reunion. Everyone should have someone in their life during times of crisis, during, times of triumph. And, we have put a lot of energy into a child welfare system to, produce foster parents and, other resources, kind of create alternate solutions. And actually, when we invest in the strengths of families and in the strengths of young people to determine who are the important people in their lives, that's when we really help them build durable relationships that will help them avoid these cliffs on housing and workforce and, all of the other things. So we need both of these things. And that's kind of how I came to really understand this need.
Lisa, it's so interesting to hear you say the phrase durable relationships, right? Because we're talking about what is strong enough to propel a young person forward. And I need to give a shout out to our producer, Donnie, who wrote the phrase ecosystem of belonging, right? That you're seeing, because in my research on the two of you, I learned a lot about housing instability and food instability. But I also learned a lot about this desire to belong as being so foundational for young people to take that next step, to make that transition out of foster care. And Sandra, I saw you wanting to get in there. Was there something that you wanted to add to what Lisa had to say?
I was just going to say that the way we got to the conversation that Lisa talked about is the biggest part of the story. And that is that young people themselves, when we looked at the data with them and we saw 22,000 young people age out of foster care every year, they are the ones that said, how do we solve that problem? What are the solutions that are out there? And I told them, there isn't one, but you can create one. And they literally came together. And for 3 years, they were the ones that developed the sole family permanency option. And basically what they did, it meant stripping down to the bare of their souls to talk about what happened to them so that it wouldn't happen to other young people. They said, I didn't want to get adopted because that meant I had to talk to my parents about them losing their parental rights when I'm 16 years old. I also knew that if the parental rights were severed, that meant my siblings were no longer legally my siblings. So they had some very rational, realistic reasons, and they took those reasons and they designed what would work for them. So the thing I'm most proud of about Soul Family is that it is 100% designed by young people and the stories they shared and what they experienced and their legacy of wanting to end that for other young people. And so that's the other part of the story that I wanted to make sure, because we really try to elevate not just the voice of young people, but the ideas and the solutions that they have.
Interested in the power of first-person storytelling? The Voice of Witness book series documents the oral histories of people directly impacted by and fighting against injustice. Each collection supports historically excluded communities to tell their own stories in their own words. The books feature a diversity of voices, including those of refugees and immigrants, incarcerated people, communities displaced from public housing, farm workers, Indigenous peoples, and more. These powerful stories highlight crucial issues and expose the impacts of harmful narratives and policies, laying the groundwork to build solidarity and movements for change. Voice of Witness books are read and used by thousands of educators, organizations, and advocates across the country each year. Visit voiceofwitness.org/read to learn more, access free resources, and get involved.
Want a sneak preview of hot new audiobooks? Then check out Your Next Listen, a new podcast from Lemonada Media and Simon & Schuster Audio. We've got everything: the hottest new thrillers, best-selling celebrity memoirs, and swoony romances. And these aren't tiny clips either. They're entire chapters you can listen to. Your Next Listen is out November 11th, wherever you get your podcasts.
Can you help me understand the before? Was there a period in which severing parental ties, why would that be an attractive option to a young person transitioning out of the foster care system? What would compel a young person to want to do that?
In order to be adopted, parental rights have to be severed, legally severed. And so, there's a point in time when young people have to decide if they're living with a foster family and they want to be adopted, there has to be a legal process to terminate their parents' rights. They don't want that typically at the age of 16 and then, or older. There comes a certain age that they just don't want to do that. And it's personal to each young person. The other factor with that, though, is that if a young person gets adopted, they lose all their benefits, all those basic needs benefits that they'll need into adulthood, tuition waivers, housing support, all of that goes away. So they basically have to decide between a family or future supports to live in the world. And that is another thing they fixed through Soul Family. It's no longer a choice between a family and resources. It's a family and resources as they grow older into adulthood. So that's the reason that they don't want to get the parental rights terminated. But Lisa, I know you have a lot of experience in that too.
Yeah. And Sandra, I want to say thank you because that really helped clarify for me what it looked like to be between a rock and a hard place, right? You want the belonging, you want to be in that ecosystem of belonging, but the costs, one could argue, sever your belonging the only belonging you've ever had, right? With a sibling, or if you've had a parent, a mother or father, and I do want to talk about paternal kin care, those ties would have to be broken. That sounds like a very difficult position. And Lisa, I know you had some experience with that.
Well, just that we have not legally formalized our relationship with Bianca yet. She was pursuing higher education and then going on to law school. And so folks who knew about the scholarship opportunities advised us that, she was better off going into that process unattached. And so we did that. But, interestingly enough, just about a month ago, she called, and I still have the paperwork to go to probate court and do an adult adoption. And she said, I would really like to do that. Now that I'm done with law school, I still want to do that. And I think the important part about this is that we created a system that was really binary, and it doesn't work, for people. It doesn't work on the emotional end of this. Bianca is very connected to her bio family and always will be. And we do ourselves a disservice if we create this separation. We've always done our best to embrace her and her entire family. We didn't want her to have to choose between her family connections, as complex as those relationships are. And it can get messy. I mean, I'm a professional in this work, and I support families who are doing it every single day. But when you're a caregiver for somebody else's child, it's a delicate dance to walk. And I think sometimes we create very rigid rules because we're trying to control for things that really aren't controllable. And young people were really caught in the crosshairs of that, in that they're leaving foster care in many cases without having fully explored relationships that have been strained, having been kind of protected from relationships. And so they leave and they're off on their own and they're going through this cliff, and they're also just trying to navigate, why was I separated from my parent? Why was I separated from my sibling? Who came into care first? Why did this family member not come and get me? And they're exploring all of these questions that they're holding at a time when they have the least supports around them. So I think what we realized all around when we put young people at the center of the conversation and heard about their real experiences and why it wasn't working for them, it gives us a whole new world of options to explore with them on how we could make this right and better. And, for us, we've tried to model in our relationship with Bianca and her family, what the best practice of the system should be. But I can see where operating within the system on a day-to-day basis, it's still not calibrated to support that kind of flexibility and success. And that's what Sandra and I are doing around the country with young people, kind of leading the conversation and work to change policy and practice so that this really makes sense from a human perspective. Because at the end of the day, all the successes and supports we're going to talk about are really important, but it's about relationships.
Absolutely. And so, Sandra, tell me what the sole permanence, what does that do legally for a young person?
Yes. So what it does is the easiest way to think about this is that what Lisa just said, there are many relationships that young people have established while they're in the foster care system, or people that they know that they want to deepen their relationship with and actually legalize it. It's called chosen family. So they will actually have the opportunity to use their voice, as Lisa said, and consent to and find the family that they want to be legally connected. And then the other thing that it does is that it also ensures that they still continue to get all of those supports that we talked about, so that they're not going off the cliff. They have the love and the support of the people they choose to legally be connected for the rest of their life, and the supports they need to thrive into adulthood, like we all needed when we were at that age.
I just want to take a step back because in doing my research for this, I kept thinking of the word logistics, right? And I'm thinking about housing and food instability and employment. And so as we move out of this section on the challenges that young adults face as they transition out of the foster care system, Lisa, can you talk a little bit about, let's go with housing, because I know you've been on the forefront of how to solve that problem.
Yeah. So originally we were doing our state aged young people out of care at age 18. And we were part of a model. It was really just, a practice innovation to say, we know that when kids leave the system at 18, many of them not yet finished high school. In our state, our graduation rate among 18-year-olds who are aging out of foster care is only 44% by age 18. So when you think about what a young person would need to face to provide housing for themselves and meet all of their basic needs, leaving care without even a diploma or GED is really not a sustainable situation. So at the time, it was like, the mid 2000s, we had a voluntary aftercare program for young people aging out of care where they could get, up to $600 a month. It was a very modest amount of money, and that would help them find a landlord to rent to them. And, they could get some case management supports, and we would help them enroll in other subsidy programs. But it wasn't an entitlement. It was a block grant. And finally, we were able to fight to get an entitlement to age 21 for young people. But even at that time, and even when the entitlement passed, we were very reliant on landlords in the community and open market housing. And we are in a housing crisis in this country today. And those open open market solutions no longer work. Even young people during the pandemic, we were very successful on the policy front. Youth aging out of care led a national movement for subsidized rental support called FYI, or Foster Youth to Independence vouchers. They're federally issued vouchers through states, public child welfare agencies in combination with the local housing authority. And they entitle young people to 36 months of subsidized rental assistance at the HUD fair market rental rates, which are not bad rates. But they also require that a landlord has an apartment that meets a minimum housing standard. And unfortunately, because we have such a lack of affordable housing, landlords are charging far in excess of HUD fair market rates for rent. So young people were we had this huge policy win. They had the subsidy. They were holding it in their hand. And it was like a winning lottery ticket that they couldn't cash because they couldn't find landlords. So we set to task first to identify ways to help young people that were leaving foster care bridge that gap. And I sat down with our board of directors and I said, I don't see a path forward where we don't actually acquire units ourselves and rent directly to young people we serve. And we had some generous donors who jumped in the mix to help us with the first acquisition. We got a little more savvy on figuring out what state subsidies were available to organizations that were doing development for affordable housing. And we knew we needed about 110 units. We, in 2 years, bought 3 properties and have 9 units, but we need to scale. So we started working with community development corporations and partnering with other nonprofits. And now we're part of a project that's going to build 144 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units in one of our cities in Rhode Island. And those units will be available not only for young people leaving foster care, but families who are child welfare involved, who could get the child welfare system out of their life if they had stable housing, veterans, and then just other people who need affordable housing. So, I mean, my goal where, getting shovels in the ground in April, we won't give people their keys until 2026 because it takes that long to actually build. We know that costs are rising more than wages are rising. And so having housing subsidy is one way to deliver back guaranteed basic supports to families and help them through. And those are the kind of investments we really need to make. So I've been so excited about our Your Way Home program because it's doing so much more than just providing housing support to young people leaving foster care. It's really creating a blueprint for how our state and really how jurisdictions throughout the country could take a new approach to creating durable, supportive, and affordable housing for all.
Sandra, as you listen to Lisa explain that, is it prominently on your radar to expand this program in other states? And I also want to ask you about, where we are with the foster care system and whether or not the pandemic specifically, with childcare, I always say the pandemic put everything into Technicolor. Did the same thing happen, the problems in Technicolor? Did the same thing happen in the foster care system? And are we at a point where we're ready to remake the system?
I would say absolutely yes. I think that it was actually during the pandemic that we realized the importance of moving quicker, being more nimble, and Soul Family was incubated during the pandemic. Like everything went to Zoom and we were able to Zoom a whole lot more with young people and everyone was sheltering in place. So we plotted and planned the whole time. That's what happened. And I think with Lisa, not to speak for her, but yes, we need a Lisa Guillette in every state because, the way that, and there are leaders like her who think about what are the solutions that need to happen, but she takes it to the next level. She, if someone tells her no, she is going to go until she finds a yes and continues to make that happen. And there are innovators out there like this. The economy, the way things are set up with the housing industry right now is really a challenge that goes way beyond foster care. It's something that, I know a lot of people are trying to work on, but for our particular population, it is service providers who are becoming landlords that's actually starting to solve that issue for this particular population across the country. I do think overall, though, people are trying to find new solutions. I will say one other thing is the realization that we need to focus more on making sure that families have what they need so they don't get involved with the foster care system to begin with is exactly the shift that has happened as part of the pandemic. And Lisa referenced that, by virtue of the fact that she's opening up her housing stock when it's available to families. That's amazing, because so many issues that are related to neglect, which is the number one reason children come into foster care, it's not abuse. A lot of that is regarded in housing, like where they're living. Place matters. And if they don't have a home, that sets the domino effect for everything else.
Right. And that makes me think of, I touched base with someone who's become a friend, David Ambrose, and his book is called A Place Called Home. And the housing instability that he experienced as a young person eventually led him into the foster care system. So the fact that that's such a clear priority for both of you is encouraging to me, hearing it from where I sit, which is not within the problem, seeped in the problem and finding my way out of it. So that is encouraging. Another thing that I found to be very encouraging was this conversation around paternal kin care. And at the beginning of this conversation, a number was cited, 300 relatives, generally for every person, but that the paternal side in particular had not been in the past fully explored. Can you talk a little bit, both of you, Sandra, Lisa, about what's happening with paternal, and do I have that phrase right? Paternal kin care, that's correct? And so what is it? What happens?
Yeah. So kin care generally, but I'm so glad you brought up the paternal side because, we are part of a system that is rooted in it has racist origins. Our system has biases. It's always had practice biases. And one of our practice biases was making an assumption that when children came into foster care, that there were really only maternal resources at play. The mom was there. Historically, some, child welfare didn't explore dad's side of the family, or they maybe asked the question, where's dad? If the answer was dad's in jail or dad's unknown, there wasn't a lot of effort to look at paternal resources, right? And, I helped Bianca map her, do an eco map, when we started working together. She found her paternal relatives. And just like Antoine Fisher in the movie Antoine Fisher, she probably need not have spent a day of her life in foster care because she had family in Atlanta, Georgia. She had people that, went down and met a grandmother there and was embraced and, probably could have been going to family reunions for years. And it was because of the biases of the system. Those resources were never explored. So, and child welfare systems historically were biased against family members. They made assumptions that if parents had kids coming into care, that there probably weren't any fit or willing family members, and they looked for non-relative caregivers. We know that every child has resources and that when we can successfully support kinship caregivers and set them up for success with the right resources and with parity, for a very long time, if you were a non-relative foster parent and you took in somebody else's child, they gave you a monthly board rate. If you were grandma and got tapped on the shoulder to do that, they didn't give you anything. They gave you the kids and said, good luck, And so part of our work has been creating parity so that families are truly empowered to take care of their own and are equally supported in that endeavor by the systems.
Want more from your favorite Lemonada Media podcasts while supporting the shows that help make life suck less? Subscribe to Lemonada Premium today. As a subscriber, you'll unlock exclusive bonus content like never-before-heard interviews, behind-the-scenes moments, bonus episodes, and so much more. It's easy to sign up no matter what podcast app you use. On Apple, you can just click the Lemonada logo in the Apple Podcast app and hit subscribe. For all other podcast apps, head to lemonada.supportingcast.fm to subscribe. That's lemonada.supportingcast.fm.
Hi, I'm Emily Deschanel.
And I'm Carla Gallo, and we're excited to tell you about Boneheads, our new Bones rewatch podcast.
I played Dr. Temperance Brennan.
And I played Daisy Wick, and we are going to watch from the very beginning.
We're going to watch the episodes. We're going to reminisce. We're going to laugh. We're going to cry. We're going to tell behind-the-scenes stories.
We're going to go on tangents.
A lot of tangents.
So whether you're a seasoned Bones fanatic or a newcomer looking to dip your toes into the wild world of forensic anthropology, this show is for you.
Boneheads from Lemonada Media is out now wherever you get your podcasts.
All of this makes me think of Ai-jen Poo, who is very involved in domestic helper work and the care economy. She says that phrase a lot. And one thing I want to ask you about, Sandra, is how we think in an innovative way about compensating social workers, because that is the backbone. My own family has experienced this. Like, social workers are change makers and they are impact creators. How do we think creatively about compensating, retaining, and attracting more people into social work?
That's a great question. And that is probably the number one issue that everybody in this country is dealing with right now, is the recruitment and retention of social workers. And there's a couple of ways to answer that question. You know, first of all, many social workers are not paid a livable wage. And I think people would be surprised to know that. So start there. Pay them a livable wage. It's inconsistent across the country. I think if there was an expectation that everyone who is a social worker had a livable wage just as a starting point, that would be one thing. I think that there are other things that are not financial, though, that have to be addressed as well. And there are things like the use of technology. I have to bring that up because so many systems in this country are still operating off of very antiquated systems, like data systems. There's one other thing I want to say, too, that I have been getting more concerned about over the years, and that is that there are some states have laws that if there is a child fatality in their system, that the social worker, supervisor, director, the whole chain of command can actually be prosecuted for that child fatality. And let's think about this. The one thing about child welfare we know is guaranteed, unfortunately, is that there will be child deaths. That is the business of child welfare, is protection from child abuse and neglect. So when you are set up that way, and that is what you do, this is not a perfect system. Things are going to happen, and there's no grace for that in some states that are actually prosecuting social workers. Think about that. If you're a 17-year-old thinking about wanting to work in child welfare, and in your state, you've heard all the stories about how someone went to prison because they made mistakes. Their caseloads were high.
Right.
They couldn't get to all of the visits. They couldn't see all the people, and something happened. There you have it. Nobody wants to work in a system that's going to punish you for doing your job when you're not resourced to do it effectively.
I mean, Sandra and Lisa, both, I have to tell you, and then Lisa, I want to hear what you have to say about this, but this is not a headline when you think about foster care, that social workers are subjecting themselves to possible prosecution in the event that the worst of the worst happens, right? That is the deal you make. I mean, the phrase that comes to my mind is that's the deal with the devil you make when you get into this work. And something has to change to better protect the people who are willing to do what is fundamentally human, empathetic, caring work. I mean, it makes my head explode. And I'm so glad that we've arrived at this point in the conversation, because if there is anything Lemonada Media does, it is talk about the hardest things that are happening in our world their motto is to make life suck less, which people say with a little bit of a half smile, but we got to make life suck less for people who are willing to do the very important job of social work.
100%. Yeah, no, it's everything that's been said. I mean, the piece on living wage is so crucial. And, I don't think we always take stock in where we are right now. In our state, in Rhode Island, a third of our households in Rhode Island are housing cost burden, meaning that the family is spending more than 30% of their income on their housing costs. And close to 30% of Rhode Island households are experiencing food insecurity. So we're at a point where the starting point is when somebody walks in the door to be a social worker, the chance that they're in that third with what we know are the pay scales, for social work is very high. And so we do need living wages in the system, and we do need, you don't have the wherewithal to go in and meet with people in crisis every day and help them solve their most perplexing challenges if you're going home to the same kind of insecurities that they're dealing with, right? We need to be able to come at it because, as Sandra said, caseloads are high. The threat of prosecution today is very real. The burden of all of these challenges for workers is immense. And if you're not able to at least come to the table knowing that your children are cared for, that your mortgage is being paid, that's a problem, And so when we think about other ways to incentivize it, I mean, we need the living wage to start off. If we could find childcare subsidies for families, that could be an incentive in this sector. If you could drop your child or children off in a safe place as you're going to work, if you were getting, a return on investment that you made for your education and getting student loans covered, that's a great place to start to incentivize. And we need to provide this real supports, but not real supports instead of those other things. I hear people say, we're so worried about burnout in the workforce this year, so we're going to focus on well-being initiatives for staff. That's great. But if you're not doing these foundational things, then we're treating symptoms and not the real challenges here. So, I still have hope that there are going to be more people going into the field of social work. Just 2 nights ago, I accepted a $20,000 check from a philanthropy class at a college in Rhode Island where 18 students came together to write an RFP, to examine social challenges. They were resourced to actually make funding awards, and they funded 3 nonprofits in the state with a total of $50,000. And, and these are young people who are going into public service and into social work. So, we do have a pipeline, and we have to make sure that when young people leave school or get their credentials, that we have workforce opportunities that are ready for them and that will afford them an opportunity to bring their talents and skills to youth and families. Because I think we've established this is complex work and we need great people doing it, and that they will be compensated and supported. And hopefully it won't suck less. Hopefully it'll be really great because, I love this career. It's the most powerful thing that I've ever had a chance to be a part of next to my family. It feeds my soul. And, I think that we need to make this a doable proposition because if I started in this career today and not 30 years ago, I don't know that I could have made it. And I made it with a bachelor's degree and, a decent amount of privilege from a family of origin that would make sure you didn't fall through the cracks. If the car broke down and it was something that I couldn't afford to repair, my father, I knew I could count on my parents to come through for me. And I worked a second job right up 10 years in till I had an MBA and 10 years of experience and finally got a job that I could give up my bartending. I don't know that even with 2 or 3 jobs that young social workers today, with the same or less privilege than I had, are able to make a commitment to this field. And that's sad because we need the best people in this work. We really do.
Yeah, we need you. Sandra, is there any story that you can share with us as we wrap this up? I love ending on a note that made me smile and warmed my heart that Lisa just shared of that this work feeds her soul. Is there any end note that you can share with us. Why have you stayed in this work for as long as you have?
You know, that's an easy answer for me. And Lisa's tearing up. People can't see that. And she's going to make me tear up. But that is because first of all, I see it as a privilege. I was not raised in a lot of privilege. And I've always said that if I ever get to a place where I can open doors for other voices of young people, I'm going to slam that door wide open and make sure everybody comes through it. And that's the thing that keeps me in this work is the young people themselves, the young people who every single day, no matter what is going on with them, they show up, they tell us what they need, they struggle through what they're struggling through, and they come up with solutions. And to me, that is the most powerful thing. I have a lot of stories about things that young people have done to create their own organization so they can do federal and state advocacy to change the policies and practices of this world. Young people who are helping each other find their permanent legal connection so that they can have love and family for the rest of their lives. Every day is a privilege and an honor. And when people say, well, how many kids do you have? I say 147,000 because that is my aim. And that's who I love.
Well, you are both doing important, beautiful work. And I want to thank you both because as a journalist for more than 20 years, this is the first time that I've thought, I want to learn more about where we are in the foster care system. And I feel so lucky that the two of you have made time for this conversation today. You're making people like me smarter on the topic. And my job is to go out and share that expertise with anyone who is able to listen. And this is one of the most important conversations that we've had on No One Is Coming to Save Us. It's really, we're at the point where it's the domino effect. And now we're having conversations about food instability and foster care. It's all connected and we need to do better. We need to make life suck less. So thank you so much to Lisa and Sandra. I want to say a big thank you for the support that we receive from the Annie E. Casey Foundation. The Annie E. Casey Foundation is devoted to building brighter futures for all children. You heard a lot about what we hope that will look like in the future for youth and young adults in the United States. We've got a lot of work to do, but we have incredible people who are willing to do it. Thank goodness. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria.
Views expressed in this episode are solely those of the participants. No One Is Coming to Save Us is a Lemonada original produced with Neighborhood Villages. The show is produced by Kyle Sheely and Martine Macias. Our audio engineer is Noah Smith. Music is by Hannes Brown. Our VP of weekly content is Steve Nelson. Our executive producers are Stephanie Whittles-Wax and Jessica Cordova-Kramer, along with me, Gloria Riviera. If you like the show and you believe what we are doing is important, please help others find us by leaving us a rating and writing us a review, and most importantly, by telling your friends. Follow No One Is Coming to Save Us wherever you get your podcasts or listen ad-free on Amazon Music with your Prime membership. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week. Until then, hang in there. You can do this. Hi, everyone. Gloria Riviera here, and we are back for another season of No One Is Coming to Save Us, a podcast about America's childcare crisis. This season, we're delving deep into 5 critical issues facing our country through the lens of childcare: poverty, mental health, housing, climate change, and the public school system. By exploring these connections, we aim to highlight that childcare is not an isolated issue, but one that influences all facets of American life. Season 4 of No One Is Coming to Save Us is out now wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you looking for ways to make your everyday life happier, healthier, more productive, and more creative? I'm Gretchen Rubin, the #1 best-selling author of The Happiness Project, bringing you fresh insights and practical solutions in the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast. My co-host and happiness guinea pig is my sister, Elizabeth Kraft.
That's me, Elizabeth Kraft, a TV writer and producer in Hollywood. Join us as we explore ideas and hacks about cultivating happiness and good habits.
Check out Happier with Gretchen Rubin from Lemonada Media.